Henry Jekyll's full statement of the case. Okay, so this is basically the last will and testament of Dr. Henry Jekyll, where he gets to gush about himself while acting like he isn't a homicidal, degenerate junkie. Was that kind of harsh? It's probably harsh, but he's like my least favorite character in this book. Like, I like Utterson. I love Lanyon. There's something about Jekyll. I don't know him, personally. Utterson and Lanyon do. But if someone like Lanyon, who even argues with him on the regular, finally gives up on him, if Utterson, who's his friend, can't even save him from himself, what am I to think of a person named Jekyll? Let's be clear, I don't think he's a hero at all, but that's just me. But let's go ahead with the thing. He starts off by talking about how he was born in the 1800s, because nothing specific here. But he was born in a family with a large fortune, has a big dick, and was simply made to be in the industry he's been in. He goes on to say that he's an honorable and distinguished man, but he's still inclined to be in the street with his hood rat friends doing hood rat activity. He says that his life was a duty that was basically became making others happy. I can relate to that. While he was thinking all the shit he wished he could still do. It's just like, nigga, you in your 50s, what are you doing? I mean, yeah, it's nice to dream a dream of time gone by, but, like, that was in Les Miserables, and we all know what happened to that lady. We all know what happened to that lady. Just downhill from there. Other men would hold their heads high on what they did, the good doctor says, but he felt like he was too high up on his horse to let people know that he, too, had guilty pleasures like the common man, and this position is exactly what got Jekyll to think about how to divide the good and the bad in people. Interesting theory, isn't it? Look at it, like, as he was comparing himself with everybody else, he wanted to do something drastic. But at the same time, it's just like, why are you paying attention to how other people are? There are things that if people don't know what you did, what makes you think you're gonna know what other people did? That's what always weirds me out. And also, if people don't want you to know, why is that your business? I don't understand people who don't mind their business. He was particularly interested in avoiding the law. Well, it's the law of life as he calls it, but it's just like, it's still a law, man. Like, where are the officers? Like, I agree with you. You shouldn't have to show your ID to anybody who isn't the damn police. I don't want to show my ID to them either. Required to by law. Anybody else, I don't have to do a damn thing you're asking me to, and you're honestly creeping me out with that. Well, he calls the laws of life. Well, he claims that it's basically like religion, and he refers to it as a spring of distress, which probably means he's worried about what God would think, which is like, it's weird. Men fear the Lord greater than women do, but only a man could have explained this to me. When he told me that a man will do something knowing that it's stupid and still do it anyway. Like, he was trying to avoid the law of life, but he didn't think about what God would think when he clubbed Carew to his expiration date. He's such an innocent, precious soul, Jekyll was, isn't he? You'll understand my vices by the end of this, because I'm going to make it very clear. Also, this is a super long entry, so. Eventually, he says that he isn't a hypocrite, and I completely agree with this sentiment. He is a liar, and not a very good one. He also states that his desire to find relief from him feeling the shame throughout the day, as it is taking as much of a toll on him as his everyday work at this point of the confession. What he did previously or recently? Because, like, book never stipulates. He never really stresses what shame he's talking about. Actually, throughout the entire book, his accountability is low. It's below the floor. It's on the same level as this house has people in it. If you've never seen that, oh, dude, you're missing something, because that's some good shit. That's some really good shit. Y'all remember in the story when Utterson mentions that Jekyll had a background back in the day? I saw this part of the confession, right? And it just reminded me of that, and I wonder if that was part of the shame that Jekyll was actually talking about before, which is why I made reference up to the past, or what he just fucking did. It makes me wonder why he never elaborates exactly on what the shame is. And I know this is like an 1800s or some shit, but as a chemist that everyone trusts and loves, wouldn't it be really easy to poison some of your clients so they become return customers? Like, who's gonna know? Like, this dude made a potion to turn himself into something completely different in an attempt to separate two entities of the soul within itself, which I'm not sure how you do that, but whatever. And if he has enough mentality to do that, why wouldn't I think that he'd do some crazy shit? Oh, it appears there is a little bit of light in your eye. Let me give you some medicine to fix this. Oh, you're the best doctor. You always know what to do to heal me. I know. Like, you know, I can see this nigga doing that. I can see him doing that. But at the same time, just to add in some context, if we take the cartoon into account, that version Hyde unalived 5 people. So I don't see how what I just suggested is anything out of the norm. We just don't know what Jekyll does in his regular form. He for some reason, he just believes that, like, it's always Hyde. But it's just like, but Hyde's always been there. Inside of you. He's been with you the entire time. That's what I want to say. This was like Sailor Scouts or Sailor Moon or some shit like that. Super Sailor Sammy card captor or some shit. You know, like somewhere I'd be involving the power of friendship. After a while, Jekyll discovered some mystic and transcendental stuff that pretty much gave him the confirmation bias he needed to feed into the hypothesis that a man is not one but two in the mind, which is actually a not far off suggestion in the study of science. But it still gave him the confirmation bias he needed. But in the scientific standpoint, it actually is studied this very day. I think it is some procedure they use to help alleviate patients with severe seizures by separating 2 hemispheres of the brain. I think it was called corpus callosotomy. Yeah, corpus callosotomy. And interestingly enough, this procedure is what influenced the idea of 2 brains in the mind operating as one, as many of the patients who had this procedure done at some point figure out that their hands are fighting with each other on a regular basis on regular things that they would do all the time. It's actually really interesting. Who was it? I think his name is John Scott. He actually does a study, or he does a video talking about this exact same subject of the 2 minds. I think it was called You're Not Alone, or someone else, I can't remember, but John Scott does a video on it. I thought it was the most interesting thing when I saw it. I actually was watching it while I was in the middle of raking this, so it helped a lot for me understanding, right? But the hands thing, absolutely true. Weird as shit, but absolutely true study, and it shows how the left brain and right brain can work independently, but it's crazy how it works when you see it. But anyway, back to Jekyll's confession. He goes on to say that he's walked on the moral side, but recognizes the immoral side because he was radically both, which is like, so he's a recovered YN? He's a YN in recovery, but he's having a lapse. Okay, that's all I needed to know. I just think that's such a weird thing for him to put down. Like, it's so weird. Like, cause how can you be both? Why not just be neither? Why worry about duality to begin with? It totally takes away from focusing on trying to rule the world with a rainbow bright fist. Like, I don't care if I'm good or evil if I make the fucking law, you know what I mean? Who's gonna tell me what to do once I take over the world? Who? You? I mean, probably, because I'm a negress of great dependencies, you know, because I'm from the food and all of that, right? But still, it's like, why? You know, you could be both. You don't have to wash away your sins and then act like everything can be forgotten while still dreaming about doing this. Like, that's not even a good point. Like, why would you keep, like, that's like if a pimp becoming a pastor, but missing his pimping days when he could slap the fuck out of bitches and shit. Anyway, Jekyll says that he had to live with just having to daydream about what pleasures he'd wish to enjoy even before his scientific studies, which I don't believe, because Utterson knew something about Jekyll, and that man barely looks into anything that isn't right in front of his face. Even then, he can't seem to take a fucking hint. Hence why he kept coming back after Jekyll said fuck off. You know, I love Utterson. He's a good guy. He's just out there a little bit. Utterson was never made up to be like a detective anyway. He's a lawyer with influence and potential to help those around him. So I would be foolish to think that he'd be someone who would really look that deep into something, especially of a client, and at some point not feel obligated to tell the police. You know what I mean? I kind of understand why Utterson wasn't digging so much. But at the same time, didn't you take an oath or something? I know Jekyll took an oath, but he's been violating that. That's why Lanyon stays on his ass all the time. I can deal with that. Utterson, though, he has a completely different oath. He also raids things with the police, and the police are cool with it, which is like, why would they let the dude who's the lawyer to the guy who just signed his will over to this murderer join? Whatever, they're talking to each other. What the fuck? You know, no one ever thought about that? I did. Because I'm paranoid. And there's been many times in paranoia was just justification for my crazy thinking. So, like, we'll just go off. Anyway, so when Jekyll finds his discovery, he's delighted, shimming his shoulders and knowing that there could be a chance to separate the 2 sides of man so that the evil can go his way and the good other way. in the same body, like King Solomon's coming down with the sword kind of shit. Like what? No, wait, how will they both go their own way if they're both in the same body? No one ever, see, this is why it's important. I ask questions. So he referred to his current dilemma as curse of mankind, that he's incongruous faggot, but that's bound together, which is to say that this curse is like a bunch of sticks you can't separate, because that's technically what the F word is like, it's another word for stick, which strangely enough is also referencing cigarettes too, but that's beside the point. He postulated on the idea more and more, even mentioning that he knew of agents that could do things and stuff. You see why I mentioned that he could poison people and get returning customers no problem? You see why I said that? Because I've been in the entire time. He says the two main reasons, other than science. He learned that the doom and gloom of man was for life, and he feels that the older one gets, the harder it is to basically resist the devil. Which is like, that's not true, Jekyll. That's not true at all. As someone who was formerly a fucking hothead, who is now I'm still a fucking hothead, but I'm old now. But as I've gotten older, I've calmed down a lot, because I don't have that kind of energy. I don't feel like anyone deserves that kind of anger, because, like, that's for special occasions now. I get miffed enough, I'm gonna have to take a nap before, like, 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Like, the other days, my knees cracked and I felt people moving out. Like, it was bad. It's just, to me, when I'm hearing this from a guy who's supposedly in his 50s, I find it ridiculous, because I'm in my 40s and I know I can't go back in time to do what I want to do. But I think he's having a midlife crisis, so give him grace. Now, there was actually a second reason that he had, because he still didn't have enough information or discoveries in what he was trying to do. He still made something that theorized would at least let him morph into a lower or bottom energy of his spirit. He waited for a while before trying this out, because he could have fucked up and ends up unaliving himself by poison, or the chemical compound of strange attributes would alter a personality, and OD was more than likely. I'm just taking a guess that it's either meth or acid in this mix, but either one is probably laced with Palo Santo or some powdered white sage in it for some mystical transcendental razzle dazzle. Be on it. But he did find the last ingredient, which was a particular salt that he had bought on wholesale, which was of large quantity, and late one night the doctor's patience had gotten the better of him, and he ended up mixing his ingredients together and drinking it down. He described the transformation and how agonizing it felt, all the way to the spirit being confused on what was happening, as if we're dying or not. His bones creaking and breaking in place, his skin, his flesh, his muscles, his blood shriveling and shrinking to the appropriate side, and soon the pain went away and he felt lighter, younger, and like a whole new person. He felt happier, and he was conscious of the fact that he was more reckless and wicked than his previous state. But he was also shorter too, unlike in every other iteration of the story, which kind of pisses me off on a level I don't quite understand. Like, have you ever like, the book literally says that when he's in hide mode or goblin mode, he's smaller. But for some reason, they always made the doctor look like someone's grandpa, even though he's only in his 50s and he's supposed to be a very dashing man. Like, that'd be like saying that George Clooney should play Hyde, even though his features would fit more in the description of Jekyll. For some reason, no matter what the iteration is, they always make Jekyll look like a small, meager, calm dude. Meanwhile, Hyde is this huge guy, but that's not the case. Jekyll is the tall, handsome, stomping on the floor while I'm your upstairs neighbor, white man, with a spectacular chin. Well, Hyde's supposed to be short and ugly. It's supposed to look like a troll, which also brings in some, like, questions on some ethnic things that I noticed with the story, but I'm not going to bring them up because I don't want to get into politics. But I did sit here questioning myself after a while once I used goblin mode, and this is like, wait a minute. I feel like I'm doing so wrong, but we're not getting into that. I'm not trying to say anything. I just now noticed it. But like, well, I noticed it a while ago, but I just now am bringing it up. But still, I'm going to cut that out. He ended up 10 times more wicked. 10 times more wicked he is. The doctor describes to the reader of his confession, but he couldn't see his evil side because he didn't have a mirror in his room, which I thought was weird, but explains the purchase of the one later, which Utterson should recall because he and Poole found it in the cabinet and thought it was weird. Twilight of the night was ending soon, and Jekyll, who is now high, had to skirt and sneak around his own house to get to his room. Wait, Why did he call his cabinet his room if his room is upstairs? I guess he has 2 rooms. Maybe he sleeps down there. The book never says, but he has to go to his room from his room to see himself, and that is the first meeting with Mr. Edward Hyde. This is the first time Jekyll separates himself from Hyde as well in this fashion. I mean, well, not really. When he talks about Hyde to Utterson, you can replace Hyde with we or I, and it would still make sense. Like another version of referencing the self. Like when Derek Jackson kept referring to himself in the third person while talking about being a cheating bastard after he got caught up in that. I felt like that to me when I was reading it, you know? It was just like, you're trying to convince me because you can't convince yourself. Anyway, Jekyll takes great note that Hyde is indeed much younger in form compared to the original, and if you like occult stuff like I do, because I'm into that shit, right? But I keep it to myself. Don't worry, I will never help you hurt anybody because I don't want that for me, and I probably won't talk to you ever again because no. But if you're somewhat into occulty stuff like I do, or understand some things like some esoteric or whatever like that, this would give you an idea that this is because the younger form hasn't had much growth. Hyde would be a demonstration that Jekyll's inner child is a fucking demon that has yet to mature. Jekyll also recognizes that as he stares at his Hyde form in the mirror and even sees that in a good light, he is fucking ugly and evil. And Jekyll is loving that shit up. He sees it as a part of himself, even though it's straight evil. He felt expressive, and he was right when tested, passing people in Hyde mode, or Goblin mode. I wish I could just call it Goblin mode, but then everyone get confused, and there's a lot of cognotations with it, and I just don't want to be that person, but I might use it here and there in the rest of this, because it's a fun word. But as he passed people, everyone could get confused, or stay away from him, or move to the other side of the road. When he would go out as Hyde, the people around him saw the evil and acted accordingly, and avoided the fuck out of him. He thought this was great, but personally, I don't know, man. That would send red flags to me, you know? Jekyll theorized that this is because humans commingled with good and evil, and Hyde had no good in him. Goblin mode was activated, and every human being avoided it. Whatever Jekyll did, similar to splitting up the hemisphere of the brain that caused the spirits, separated into 2 versions of the man. The thing is, there's also this process of the brain that is disabled whenever you drink a lot. I can't remember exactly what it's called, but it's something along the lines of lack of control, and I assume certain users of certain things have this happen when under the influence. And what technically happens is when you're under the influence of something, the part of your brain that keeps you from doing something you would normally do is gone. Like you aren't a thief, but one night you get drunk and you wake up and realize you stole your friend's wallet. Maybe you remember, maybe you don't. Sometimes you are a thief, but drinking or doing some substance causes you to go buck wild in the gas station. You just start stuffing your pockets full of shit and junk food, and now it's falling out of your pocket, and the clerk and the cop that just bought a free coffee at the cash register are both watching you. Like they're shocked you're actually going to try to pull this shit off. There's cameras everywhere. These motherfuckers are watching you. They ain't even asking your name because they know who you are, man. What are you doing? I knew a guy like that. He got on something and stole a bunch from a gas station, got banned from that gas station for some reason. It was just like, what are you doing? Like, you know, and the thing is, like, yeah, I get that you're under the influence, but you still did that. It's not like you became a different person under the influence. It just allowed you to do what you wanted to do. You know what I mean? It's just the lack of control is when you don't stop yourself from doing something you wouldn't do sober. So in this case, Hyde is the version of Jekyll who doesn't have any control and just does whatever the fuck he feels like doing. Do what you gotta do. What you gonna do about it? Do what you gotta do. But he loved this version of himself. And we go in between the 2 forms, one that lived the moral life and the other that would go out at night and attempt to terrorize London for funsies. And Jekyll started to make preparations for his new identity, now talking about Hyde like he's a separate person. And he started making him appear as a second person to buy a house and put it in his name in Soho, and leaving him as the only heir of Jekyll Hyde in his last will and testament. Jekyll recognized that he was getting older, and like most men, they are shocked that they can get old, and their desire to become immortal either chills or they get that midlife crisis shit, and it's all downhill from there. Women do this too, but typically it just ends up with us homeless in a car, I guess. Men do weird shit when they have a midlife crisis. I remember on Clarissa Explains It All how her dad's midlife crisis went. But everyone has a midlife crisis, but Jekyll's midlife crisis is to try to find a way of going back in time. or something. I'm not sure. So unlike the cartoon I finally rewatched and saw, there was no point where Hyde ever influenced Jekyll to do anything because they're the same fucking person. I'm just pointing this out. They're the same person. Jekyll eventually instructs his servants to accept Hyde as his lord and savior and bunkmate, and telling them that he can have access to the entire house, and he already has keys and needs to be listened to if he needs a servant or whatever. Poole and the gang are not cool with this, but they really can't say anything about it either. And just for anyone who isn't aware, during this time period, the servants all lived in the house and they had their own quarters. Some select few even had their own private quarters, like the butler, Poole. So basically, they were going to be living in the same house as Hyde, and they were all hella uncomfortable with the situation. Now, did the good doctor care? Fuck no. I mean, why would he let his certain concerns interfere with science? I know they really weren't doing that, and it's even before the Carew murder, but I don't think Jekyll would have cared either way. He had a Superman complex, and he wasn't about to let it go for nothing. Damn it. After he set up Hyde for the good light, he started his evil journey as Hyde and is doing crimes in London. He was proud of the fact that Hyde didn't even exist. Pause! Wait! I don't have any car screeching effects. Damn it. Anyway, pause. So if Hyde doesn't fucking exist, why in this confessional does he keep talking about it like it's two different people, huh? Jekyll isn't creating an inheritance for someone he actually knows. That doesn't happen until Utterson sends Poole in with the axe. Jekyll is creating a whole alter ego, a whole hidden persona. This is similar if someone fakes their fucking death to avoid taxes. Jekyll had a whole supersuit, but the supersuit was a chemical compound of strange attributes, and it turned him into a mean bastard. It turned him into a very mean bastard. I don't know. At some point, the doctor kind of brags about how he could just drink his concoction and switch back and forth between the two forms with ease, and how I thought this was funny. But he also goes on to tell the reader of his confession that his pleasures were undignified and would sometimes scare him at what he would watch or know or just observe Hyde doing when he was tagged in like a wrestling match, which I don't know how you're freaked out about that. Like, how are you gonna be terrified of what your partner did? Isn't that why he's your partner? You wanted this shit. You knew that he was like this. Just wanted to pretend you didn't. And then there were times that Jekyll would feel bad, but then he would remember, oh yeah, that was Hyde that did that. That wasn't me. Ha ha ha. And then he wouldn't feel guilty about stuff because he told himself that, even though it was his body. And he has all the memories. And Hyde wouldn't even exist if it wasn't for Jekyll wanting to do hood rat activities on the low. Do you see why I don't like Jekyll? Do you? Because, like, you know, if you're going to sit here and turn yourself into a whole thing that becomes a monster, where he terrorizes London, and in the cartoon just goes on a wild, like, running a muck spree, like, what am I supposed to feel for this individual? Like, he unleashed a monster to society. To society! So then Jekyll goes on to talk about the night where he river danced. Oh, I'm sorry. I mean, where Hyde river danced on a kid, since we're visiting Delulu Land tonight. He remembers when a passerby, Enfield, got pissed and manhandled him for it, and Jekyll recognized him later as Utterson's companion when they saw him at the window. He mentions how he feared for his life in the situation, but it was Edward Hyde who offered to bribe them. Later, he ends up opening an account in Edward Hyde's name so that the next time he river dances on a kid, no one will question the name on the check, because that was a pain in the ass. He decided to change the slanting of his handwriting on purpose to give Hyde his own signatures, which is not how that's not how it works. That's not how it works. That's not how it works at all. Like, I don't understand. I don't understand someone trying to use their offhand. Like, if you're right-handed and you use your left hand to write. Actually, you know what? Go ahead and try that right now. And I want you to compare your handwriting with your two hands. And you'll notice there's still similarities between them two hands. Slightly different, but you're still writing the same, right? Yeah, that's kind of hard to do. It's actually, like, you have to learn a whole different penmanship or something, or study a certain thing. I don't understand what slanting your hand is supposed to do. I mean, and using your offhand, you still have the same kind of signature, it's just sloppier now. Like, if this was written in 2026, he could have just written in cursive instead of print, and he would have been good to go. Nobody can read that shit after my generation anyway. Also, I do want to point this out. Jekyll never says who opens the account. He just says that the account is opened in the name of Edward Hyde. And I'm just saying, I believe that was intentional. I don't care what the experts say because I'm not reading their notes. I know other people have studied it. I'm not, because I don't care. I'm doing my own thing, and you all have to listen to me. But at some point, like, I'm looking at this is just like, so who opened the account? Why did you create a new handwriting, which you really didn't, but why did you create a handwriting for Edward Hyde when Edward Hyde have his own handwriting, since he's technically a different person? You know, I'm sitting here trying to help him. I'm sitting here trying to help and agree with him. 2 months before the murder, the doctor tells the reader he went out for a late night adventure, whatever that means, and then went to bed. But when morning came, he was half asleep, looking around the room, seeing the decent, more familiar furniture and the tall walls of the room. Although at the Soho house, his room is much smaller. His eyes blinked open and shut as they looked to the mahogany frame. And looking at the frame, there was something in the back of his head that was telling him, hey, motherfucker, this is in fact the wrong room to be waking up in. Actually, he would normally be waking up in the Soho house. And normally he'd be sleeping there as Edward Hyde. Normally he'd be waking up as Edward Hyde. This is normal on a normal occasion. But this occasion is not normal. This is wrong. Something's wrong. He keeps blinking his eyes open and shut. He's looking around, but nothing's really registering in his head. Jekyll knew something was off, but he was still half asleep and feeling way too comfortable. That bed. They just changed the sheets. The sheets were warm when you climbed it. It's just, I can't get out of this, man. It's too good. Dozing off, back and forth. You should be waking up, but the sleep's way too good. And, like, I get it. I wouldn't want to get up. Like, thick comforter blankets, full fluffy sheets, a pillow that's always cold no matter how long you lay on it. Oh my god, I just woke up and I could totally go back to bed. I should call off work today just to roll back in bed. It's been like a few years since I just spent all day in my bedroom. I try not to do that too much anymore. I'll just be somewhere else. Like the living room that no one's supposed to be in. So, during one of his waking moments, his eyes search the bed. And then his own arm comes into his sight, and he looks at his hand. He stares at it. He's staring at it. He's staring at it, and he's looking, and he's all like,
oh wow, I need Paul to schedule me a day with a dermatologist, because, God, my skin looks horrible. It's starting to look like Hyde. My hand looks like Hyde. That's weird. Wait, that's Hyde's hand? That's weird. But that's not, why does my hand look like Hyde's hand?
And then all of a sudden, it's Hyde's hand, and now he's wide awake and about to chimp out. Thank you, Chud the Builder, for giving us that. You're a real one. Arrested under the prison, bitch. His blood ran completely cold when he realized what had happened, but not really. Then he had to sprawl out of bed, jump out, run over, look in a mirror, and saw that indeed Mr. Edward Hyde had woken up in Henry Jekyll's bed. How's he going to explain this to the boys, huh? But how? How am I Edward Hyde? Jekyll questions himself, or the reader, I can't tell, but no answer is given. When he went to bed, he had already taken his magical Mario meth potion, but somehow, in some serendipitous way, Hyde was the ego present, not Jekyll. How did this happen? Why did this happen? Was unanswered. He didn't know why. He didn't understand the change, nor did he appreciate having to play Solid Snake to try to get to his cabinet in order to mix another potion to set himself back as Henry Jekyll. He was lucky that he already told the servants about Hyde, but this is the one occasion that he didn't want to be seen. What if they saw Hyde go into Jekyll's room and think that it was, like, you know, a rendezvous meeting? Or worse. I mean, like, Bradshaw the footman saw him as he walked by and looked a little freaked out to see him. Kind of clutched his pearls a little bit. It's not normal to see Hyde in the daytime. It's way uglier that way. And after 10 minutes of downing his concoction, he was back to Jekyll, and he was big upset about the ordeal. He barely had an appetite by the time breakfast was ready. He compared himself, reverting back to Hyde, to the Babylonian finger on the wall, which, for anyone who doesn't know or doesn't have a pastor for a father like I do. This is in reference to the section in Daniel 5. I think chapter 5 in the Bible, where King Belshazzar was having a party, or maybe it was just dinner, and then suddenly a growing dismembered ghost hand starts writing something on the wall. Nobody could read it except for Daniel. So King Belshazzar and his soldiers get Daniel to have him read the writing on the wall, which, you know, is the expression we use this very day, which is basically the eventual doom of Babylon was nigh, and there was nothing anybody could do about it. I mean, God could have, but he's the one who sent the message, so I don't think he was going to mind someone else's business in this case. He was just like, hey, I'm out, bye. Like, that's literally what he said. The comparison here was the transformation to Hyde in the middle of sleeping represented the hand, and having to take the potion again just to get back to normal was the writing. However, the message written for Jekyll was saying, you're going to be Hyde if you keep this shit up. Guess what he did? Guess what he did? Because we haven't gotten to all the other things that Hyde has done yet. So guess what Jekyll did? Guess what he did? Well, I don't know if you were right or not because I'm writing a script without actually asking you first, but I'm assuming you answered regardless. He figured that if he kept taking his concoctions, eventually he would just be Hyde and Jekyll wouldn't exist anymore. Jekyll started comparing his two egos as almost father and indifferent, hostile son, which is kind of a Dr. Frankenstein and Adam perspective that's pretty twisted as far as I'm concerned. Like he isn't your son, Henry. That is your goblin mode form. That is you in goblin mode, dude. Like, 1, what? 2, the actual fuck. He weighs the pros and cons when it comes to choosing which version of himself he wants to be for the rest of his life. He and Hyde share memories, he says, but that's all there is. Jekyll got to relish and share in the delights of mischief of Hyde, but Hyde apparently only remembers Jekyll similar to a cave some bandit uses to escape from capture. He knew he could deal with the daydreaming about hood rat activities better than being a short lowlife with no friends and a maid who hates him. So Jekyll decided at that point to choose, and I quote, elderly and disconnected doctor form, which is insane because he's only like in his 50s. I think he's younger than Lanyon and others. See what happens when you leave a man to his midlife crisis on his own, to himself. Please check on your dad and make sure he isn't building the space station in the backyard. Mom will beat both of y'all's asses because she knows you helped him, as if you had a choice because he told you to hold the flashlight, even though he said you were doing it wrong. However, like a lot of people who deal with substance overconsumption, he didn't get rid of Hyde's clothing. He didn't get rid of the Soho house. He didn't get rid of the chemical compounds of strange attributes that he had been using. And in fact, he just decided he was going to quit, but he wasn't going to get rid of all the paraphernalia that came with it. Just think about it. Like, you decided to stop doing a certain drug, but you still got tutors all in your house. You'll be surprised. People will use dollar bills, drinking straws, tampons, like anything. People will take apart pens, and mechanical pencils just because of the tube, but they can use it to take shit up their nose. Crazy shit in the world. People are insane. For 2 whole months, he leaves Hyde as quote-unquote dead. For 2 whole months, Jekyll was enjoying being the old bastard with friends and a good name and reputation. He was sober. He was enjoying his life. He was loving how everyone just adored him and the good deeds the doctor had done. He even destroyed the old key to the secret door, which ended up making things harder than it had to be later on. You'll find out. At the end of those 2 months, Jekyll was bored. He was missing the nightlife. He wanted to run over whores in a carriage like his GTA Plague Edition. He missed Goblin Mode. And he compared his condition to being a drunk, and how it must be just as hard to avoid a desire to keep drinking as much as it is for him to keep from wanting to be Hyde. Twisted, but fair. Jekyll just decides one night, the night of the meltdown, to swallow his magical Mario mushroom potion yet again. And this time, because it's been so long, Hyde came out like a throbbing, hot-headed dick. Veins everywhere. It's been a minute and he wants to do some real hood rat shit. And Hyde was going to be going down bad on his bullshit this time. And the worst came when he started talking to Sir Danvers Carew. And this is where I start to get to the point where... This is the point where Jekyll actually pisses me off. He claims that no moral or sane man would ever do what Hyde did. But he was also aware that Hyde is not a man. He was a separation from the man as his own evil version of said man. He said that the spirit of hell, or Goblin Mode, kicked in with the side of raging bastard, and all of a sudden, he was wailing on his old gentleman and enjoying every swing, every swish, every scream and rattling shake of his victim's body gave him. He relished in not just the killing, but the beating, the inflicting of the pain, the anguish, the sound, the way this victim was too helpless to save themselves while he got to just do whatever he wanted to do. He enjoyed causing the suffering, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. He fell in love with the most evil thing he had done, and the bloodlust achievement was unlocked. He even got a Steam trophy for it, y'all. It showed up as a Steam trophy, y'all. After he was done with the unaliving, reality came back to him, and that fury he had just flushed away, and suddenly he realized he was a murderer. And he was giddy as a pig and shit. He ran into the Soho house and burned, I guess, the papers that Carew had, or I don't know what papers it was, honestly. I know that Carew was carrying something, but I don't understand what papers. I don't know if he stole his papers and burned them or what. I'm actually kind of confused. I'm also confused on why he didn't burn the cane. Like, you burnt the papers, but you didn't burn the cane, even though you know the cane's split in half. But it was whatever. I'm not a homicide maniac, so I don't get it. But anyway, then he was running down the lamplit street, giving himself high fives and good games for taking out an elderly man who probably actually needed a cane. Then he got to his house, made his potion, and held a toast to himself over the dead man. Then Jekyll was back in his body, and he got on his hands and knees, praising our Lord and Savior for being able to hide his great value Clark Kent body. And then the memories of Sir Danvers came back. And then Jekyll was on his hands and knees begging God for mercy. Surely not the same mercy Sir Danvers received, right? I would hope not. He didn't think of that. He was remorseful until a sense of certainty that no one would suspect him of the murder came to his mind, and then he was joyful again. Yay! The next day came, and that was when he started hearing news kids holler about the homicide, and he had to remember the murders again. This time his alter ego is well known throughout London. And everyone wants to see where he's at and what he's been doing, you know, like where you at now? Where you at, shorty? Should we hang him or execution by shooting? But that's what the people are asking. But in any regard, Jekyll felt safe staying Jekyll, and no one would know about the tragedy that happened, no matter how horribly it affected the community around him. Which is crazy because everyone was insulted by his murder. It's just like there wasn't a person who didn't like Sir Danvers' career. I'll put it that way. Much like people always had something nice to say about Jekyll, same said about Carew. Except Carew isn't taking a certain substance that turns him into a vile bastard. And then he starts talking about how he's going to spend the rest of his future doing good to make up for his bad deeds that he had indulged in and hide. Which is funny because I don't know if he would have stopped river dancing on a kid if Enfield hadn't inserted himself and stopped him from doing it. Like, think about it. The only reason he didn't keep stomping on that child is because Enfield rushed him and snatched his ass up to stop him until the family got there and got the girl, right? If he hadn't been there, it just makes me curious. But then again, Jekyll shows no remorse with that either. And he's obviously not remorseful about Danvers' death, whom he would have known as Utterson was also his lawyer. And it sounds like most of the men in the story run in multiple circles and know each other. So it's just like, he's not sad about what happened to the kid, and he's definitely not upset about Sir Danvers at all. He's too worried about himself. Jekyll even goes out of his way to remind Utterson about all the good Jekyll had done in the last year. And this is where I have to stop and actually talk about why I don't like Henry Jekyll. This entire confession is a glorified idolization of one man over him, being a menace to London all night until he goes to work the next day as a humble... It's like the opposite of a superhero. Like, you know, there's a hero that goes out at night, but instead of him doing good, he's just causing trauma, so the police a job to do, I guess. I don't know. He isn't listing out all the horrible things he did as Hyde either, which, if it was anything like the cartoon, oh my god. No, he only talks about 2 instances with 2 people, a child and an elderly man. The 2 demographics of society that have been deemed the most weak and vulnerable. Hyde never, as far as his book tells us, goes after anyone his own age or even his own fucking size. The kid was smaller than him. Sir Danvers probably couldn't even stand without his fucking cane. And he was well older than Jekyll, and yet he went out of his way to take out 2 people who couldn't defend themselves. Straight coward. Actually, no. Actually, there's other people who we kind of violated, but we'll get to that. That comes later. But Dr. Henry Jekyll's victims were people who couldn't defend themselves. One of them was actually an old man, not a man in his 50s doing all this shit. I feel like he's in his 20s. Jekyll does not once mention regret for what he did. He doesn't act like he feels bad as much as he does gloss over everything that he does and just gushes over his discovery that he became an evil bastard when he takes his chemical compound of strange attributes, and he likes that shit. He likes being that guy. He likes the dude who stomps on kids and, like, takes swings at old men with objects that are way too much. And as we remember in this book, that was a full, solid, heavy cane. Like, Jekyll's a very tall man. Well, I don't know, very tall, but a decently tall man. Heavy-footed stepped, strong, sturdy, solid build, chiseled face. You know, like, he looks good. No matter whatever iterations are described of him, he looks a certain way. That cane was insane, bro. That cane was insane. It was insane. Literally, at no point in this shit have I written out that Jekyll gives a fuck about the people he hurt or anyone else around him. He only enjoys doing good because it gives him recognition. He only chose to stay as Jekyll because he wanted to keep his friends and not go to prison and all that shit. But he couldn't even commit to that because he went back to being the bastard not even in 6 months. And I know addiction is a terrible thing, but you stomp on children and unalived an old man. And I feel like he only talks about these because these are only things that he can't get over. I assume he did terrible things as Hyde, but these are the 2 instances where I think really defined how he felt as Hyde. And then it slaps him in the face later. In fact, Jekyll only tells us about those 2 instances, but nothing else. He just glosses over everything else. Like, he calls them pleasures and delights, but it wasn't delightful to whomever he was affected by. Does he even know or acknowledge what he's done, or has he done so much that he can't remember it all? I have questions. Even when Jekyll starts to getting into the account of the Carew murder, even suggesting that he can't quite commit to saying it was him because it was more likely Hyde, which is like, did they have fingerprinting back then in the 1800s? And would it have been refined enough to tell if it was a different person than another? Because it's pretty clear the 2 entity spirits have the same fucking handwriting minus the slope. And we know it's the same handwriting because Jekyll told us he manipulated his handwriting in a way to give Hyde his own signature, which didn't work because that's not how writing works at all. He brought his alter ego to his servants and freaked them all out. He went and signed away his life and wealth to a midget bitch of a demon. He did so many things for his own selfish reasons because he found a way to be a delinquent in his 50s. But never once did he think that he and Hyde were actually separated. In fact, no matter what this confession says, Jekyll isn't admitting any guilt as much as he is trying to blame the alter ego he created, which still makes him at fault. Speaking of Hyde, let's get into that issue. Why is Hyde a different person when he does bad things, when those were bad things you always wanted to do via manifesting a physical alter ego with a short man syndrome? But any other time Jekyll talks about Hyde, he refers to him as a thing or a title or an article. He never fully sheds the identity of Hyde, no matter how much he tries, acting as if the 2 completely different people is strange, but it would explain why Jekyll fell in the end. If Jekyll considers himself an old man and Hyde younger, it would make sense that the one who beat an elderly would do it to another, even if it is himself. Honestly, if it wasn't for the chemical comment on certain attributes, this would be an interview's perspective for DID, but then we wouldn't have Moon Knight, and he's a gem. Jekyll tries so hard to convince the reader that he and Hyde are 2 different entities, all because he believed a chemical compound of strange attributes separated him in 2. I don't understand this logic. Okay, even if there were 2 souls in a body now, how am I supposed to know who's who, and how to deal with the unaliver without affecting the good doctor who brought this unaliver to existence? Like, how? It's still the same brain. It's just working as 2 separate forms. Like when I mentioned the corpus callosome, one thing that I didn't say is while the 2 sides of the brain do cause one's hands to American Sign Language rap battle, the 2 halves still work together, surprisingly. And I know I'm not going to be describing this right, but that's why I told you to go watch the John Scott video about it. Surprisingly, when one eye, let's say the left eye, is shown an image, or no, maybe it's the right eye. I don't know. It's one of the 2 hemispheres. I can't remember. One is intuitive and one is logical. The logical one speaks, the intuitive one is silent. But whichever one was shown an image, the person would more than likely not see it in that eye. But if asked a question related to whatever it is they looked at with the other eye, the brain would still register it. But when they came up with the answer of how, like, let's say there's a banana in front of you, and it's in front of the eye that's the silent, intuitive side, right? So it would be like the left eye, I think. The right eye, which deals with the left side of the brain, which is more logical, doesn't see that there's a banana on your left side, and your left eye picks it up. Then someone decides to ask you, can you tell me, what would be a really good type of pudding to have right now? Or what kind of dessert bread is your favorite? And you just spit out, oh, well, banana's pretty good. Or be like, oh, what type of fruits do you like or whatever? What kind of fruit's on your mind? And you could be like banana. And you could sit there and be asked, well, how did you come up with the idea of banana? You saw it in your left eye. You didn't see it in your right. The right brain is going to come up with some logical mumbo jumbo to explain it away. Like, oh, well, you mentioned fruit, and I just figured bananas would be good. Like, I saw a documentary about monkeys the other day, and automatically made me think of bananas. Your brain will do that. The logical side of your brain will rationalize what the intuitive side of the brain's information's taking in just to give you an answer. In fact, there could be a good time where, like, you'll have an answer to someone without knowing, why you have an answer, and that's probably why, because your intuitive side, your left side of the brain, right side of the brain, which intakes on the left side, gathers the information, and your right eye, which is attached to the left side of your brain, rationalizes that information. So even though the two brain halves still work together, one being the speaker and one being silent, the silent side could be considered, or at least this is how I'm phrasing it, because I'm an idiot, an intuitive side, and the logic side is the one that controls speaking language. The intuitive side, which doesn't control speaking, can still evaluate information and come up with all sorts of random shit. And the logical side, which is speaking, talking, and coming up with conclusions, will derive conclusions from the silent side, is able to rationalize an answer. It might not even be an answer that you realize is wrong, because you can see the banana with your one eye, but it's not registering in the part of the brain it should, or not registering at both at the same time. But the brain is still able to give signals to each other and work together. So you'll see a banana, but not really know you'll see a banana, and then you'll mention a banana, and when someone asks you why you mentioned banana, there's a good chance you'll just make something up. Be like, oh, I just saw monkeys the other day. Oh, or I just went to the grocery store and I remembered I kind of wanted bananas. Your brain will fucking do that. When they're connected, that's not much of a conscious thought. But when they're separated from this procedure, it's very clear how the brain actually works, and it's an insane thing to observe. So when Jekyll tells me he feels disconnected from Hyde, I believe him. What I don't believe is he believes they are disconnected. He feels it, but they actually aren't. They're just not touching right now. I believe that Jekyll doesn't feel like Jekyll, and that Hyde is his own person. I don't believe that at all. I do not believe that Jekyll is unaware that that is an effect of the concoction, similar to drinking, which is why he compared it to drunks. Which is the conclusion, Jekyll is a drug addict, and he's starting to refuse step 1 out of 12 steps, admitting what you did bad. Carew would have still been alive if Jekyll didn't decide to start doing his magical shit and create a goblin version of himself, and in the end, Jekyll is still responsible for Carew, whether Hyde did it or not, because, nigga, you're hiding the fucking unaliver in your own body, dude. Come on, man. The kid wouldn't have been in the yard. Hyde had stopped if Jekyll wouldn't have been so desperate to live out his fantasies of being a naughty boy. Jekyll forced his servants to accept the weirdo who ended up becoming an unaliver of a man who everyone actually cared about. Jekyll didn't even grieve the man he took out. He was too worried about being found out as a killer. I can't like Jekyll just because he caused himself to not be likable to me. He knows Hyde is dangerous to everyone around him. He knows the maid in the Soho house would poison him if given the chance because he's a shitty boss. He knows that continuing to become Hyde over and over, he might get stuck that way. Speaking of which, he mentions the end finally came on a nice January day, a while after the Carew murder, and was enjoying a walk in a park he was taking. Eventually sat on a bench and just breathed in the air. He was breathing in the sunlight, just oh my god. I almost died from that. I never need to do that again. He felt something was off in the spirit, like something familiar, but it wasn't so clear. You couldn't tell what it was. Mind you, when I read in this part, right, when I finally got to this part, I don't know if Jekyll was still taking the Hyde shit at this point. I don't know if he completely stopped with the Carew murder. I don't know if he did any of that. I mean, there's, like, to me, it's a good chance he didn't give a damn at all, right? I actually didn't think about that until I was reading this over, actually. Like, did he stop? I actually never thought about that until I read this. This is just like, he went back to it. I know he begged on his hands and knees to God about it, but, I don't know. Would he want to stop after he did that? I don't know. I would hope so, because now he's got bloodlust in his system, and once you take a person's life, it's a lot like an animal. Like, you kind of gotta get put down because you're not gonna stop. You like that shit. But he was feeling different. It was something familiar, but he wasn't sure what it was. It was like, you can't tell if you gotta throw up or, like, have heartburn. Yeah, that was probably that feeling. But he's in the park, and he's noticing other people in the park, and he started to compare himself to them. Literally saying,
I was like my neighbors, and then I smiled, comparing myself with other men, comparing my act of goodwill with their lazy cruelty of their neglect.
What in the fuck is even that, Jekyll? You have no idea how mad I was when I was reading that. No idea how furious I was. I almost threw my book, but then I remember I don't have a book. I have Calibre and strained eyes, because, like, sometimes I have to use my glasses in order to read. It irked my spirit when I read that. It was just like, what are you doing? I cannot imagine someone who stomped the yard on kids, beats an old man with the same vigor as the ocean trying to drown you, or worse, the drumbeat of a Fear Factory song, sitting there in a park assuming their active goodwill is superior to people who have never thought of doing something horrible to another person. Yeah, okay, there's blackmail and breaking and entering and trafficking, chemical compounds of strange attributes, damage to property, possible homicide of questionable accountability, smuggling, assaults all over the board, but that's literally the minimum. There's probably RICO charges in here somewhere. I know there's all sorts of stuff in this book, and everyone's playing their parts in this. At least everyone else who's committing a crime never acts like they didn't do nothing, though. Well, at this time, it seems like the Lord God Almighty heard Jekyll, how he prayed to him, and then noticed he was acting like a cunt, comparing himself to other people. And he was just like, God just decided, he was like, hey, what would happen if, you don't need that potion to become Hyde anymore? Like, what do you think would happen, Jekyll? Now, Jekyll didn't get a chance to hear the question because he was already transforming into Hyde in the middle of the park, in the daytime, around witnesses everywhere. And then Jekyll is all like, what the fuck, Lord? And the Lord did not answer the sinner, for his judgment had been made. Fucketh this guy, so saith the Lord of hosts. So then Jekyll says that he had to make his way back to the house without anyone seeing him, which that back door key would have been real fucking useful, huh? Actually, no, I lied, because I was reading the wrong page. Jekyll had to find somewhere to hide, because, he killed someone. He's a wanted man. No, actually, I lied. Hyde is a wanted man. It's just that Jekyll is stuck as him now. Hyde is who he is. But now he needs to get his chemical compound of strange attributes because he can't stay as Hyde. He'll die. Which is actually true, but not for the reasons we all know. And if you didn't watch the beginning of the series and you're just here reading this confessional, you should probably go back and watch those because he's such an asshole, I swear. He tried to think of what to do and remembered he could still write in his hand, which was like, yeah, dude. Just because you're a changed man doesn't make you a different person. Young Kratos and old Kratos is still Kratos. I don't know who he's trying to fool, especially now that he's writing in first person as Hyde. Suddenly, Hyde is a separate person, huh? He took a ride to a hotel on Portland Street and ended up burying his teeth at the driver, who was kind of laughing at him. The smile went away really quick, which is good because the dude was about to snatch the back of his neck by them black-eyed peas, man. He was going to get it. He got to the inn. No one looked him in the eye, but they did help him get a room. Up in his room, Hyde, or Jekyll, whoever, was pissed, but he had enough brains to know how to use his anger or to fuel his goals, which is rather impressive if it weren't for the fact that I know this is how some people on the chemical compound of strange attributes act when they're desperate for their shit. Ain't no one more conniving than someone hooked on a chemical compound of strange attributes, okay? They become the smartest people you'll ever meet, I swear to God. But this dude is on something that gives him the sniffles, that gives him the itch, that makes him feel away, that makes his body do crazy shit, and now he's a monster. Gotten to the point where, like, yeah, you were monstrous when you took the shit, but now you're just gonna stay a monster until you take the shit in order to calm that stuff down. That's the sucky part about it. When it goes from, this drug is leaving me, to, I'm a prisoner now. Isn't it funny how that works? Isn't it funny how the thing that makes you feel free is actually your prison? Because you can't escape without it. You need it, but at the same time, you're barred up, like, beyond choice. So he writes 2 letters, one to Poole and one to Lanyon, and that is to set up the whole drug trafficking scenario that Lanyon wrote about in his final letter to Utterson. So now Utterson, in a metaphorical way, learns that Lanyon died from a metaphorical OD. And I know that the book doesn't say that, but that's kind of what it's leaning to from my perspective, at least an allegory, but that's how I saw it. I mean, why wouldn't Lanyon try Jekyll/Hyde's potion after he sees what it does to Jekyll, right? I'm not even joking. Scripts will try anything that seems like it leads to a mystery that needs to be solved. You want to know how I know that? Because I grew up with a generation where Where's Waldo's books existed. That's how I know. I grew up with a generation where Finger Hut magazine, or whatever fucking highlight finger cuts? I don't know. It used to be these magazines that our moms would get in the mail, and they would always have hide and seek stuff in it where you just like find shit hidden in whatever. That's what I grew up in. So, I already know it's already human DNA that people like snooping and learning things or being curious, even though they know they shouldn't, and they see what it does to people. But at the same time, it's just like, it'd be me. And then like months later, it was you. It was you, motherfucker. Once he sends the letters out, he gets in another cab, but he's going through withdrawals, or what he likes to call fear and hatred. And no, it's withdrawals. Fear and hatred are just symptoms of that. The cab driver was getting freaked out, and Hyde did the most rational thing he's done in the entire book and just jumped out of the moving carriage. Thank God it wasn't a moving car on the freeway, but I don't think that's how fast horses go. How fast can a horse go? Let me go look. Between 34 and 55 miles an hour. Is that why they call it horsepower? That's interesting. I learn something new every day. However, the most interesting part was how Lanyon reacted when Hyde met with him that night. He wasn't afraid of dying. He was afraid of how everyone was seeing him as Edward Hyde. And at that point, I was like, dude, are you fucking serious? You did horrible things. You hurt people. You literally scared your friend to death, aka probably gave him something in your compound. And that was probably what killed him via OD. But I feel like that's more of a metaphorical thing or whatever. Lanyon was trying to hang on for dear life, but there ain't no hanging on to that. His life was dread. He was gone. I don't know any man who isn't afraid of how the world sees him. As a woman, men don't want to be viewed as monsters, and men who are monsters stay hidden in the dark. The same way Hyde was hidden in the dark spaces of Jekyll. Pause. Jekyll wanted to be that monster. He loved being that monster, but as soon as someone he respects and cares about, someone who looks at him and knows who he is, and knows this is right up his goddamn alley, that's when all of a sudden he fucking cares. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, on the way to Lanyon's, he punched a woman in the face when she offered him a box of lights. I don't know what the fuck that is. I have no idea why. He was just short, so that's probably why he's so angry. I only make short jokes on men who are horrible people. Everyone else is safe for now, so carry on. He vaguely remembers Lanyon cursing him out and then throwing him out of his place. Lanyon is my favorite character, I swear. Rip to that man. You were the hero we needed. Jekyll remembers vaguely hauling his tired ass back home. He slept through his nightmares and woke up still rattled but better. But now he's scared of who he really is. Amid a demon with anger issues. So later on, he decides to take a stroll out after breakfast. I'm starting to think sunlight activates Goblin mode now, because Jekyll starts transforming back to Hyde again, and he has to run in his room and hide from everyone before he's seen. It seems that Jekyll's spirit has completely shifted to Hyde. Chemical compound with strange attributes did its job. It separated the two, but now his spirit is rotten from all the terrible things he's done. And now his physical conscience is that of a horrid, wretched human being who no one will feel pity for when he's hung from the gallows if he's fortunate enough to make it that far. The fruits of his spirit are apparent in his flesh, as we say. Now, he was locked in his home as a prisoner of his own physical manifestation. Good. If he falls asleep or dozes off, Hyde comes back. I'm sorry, I don't mean to laugh at that. Anybody else I feel bad for, but this guy. He has to take the shit ton of this chemical compound and strange attributes regularly just to maintain his Jekyll form. His concentration and sleeplessness are getting the better of him. The concoction he used for fun nights are now being used to keep him normal. It's almost an allegory to dope sickness, where if someone doesn't get that substance that they're hooked on, they're going to be in bed miserable, in pain, their body hurts. I think they vomit sometimes. Maybe, I would assume they would, especially if they ate the night before, but I really don't know. In the end, he hated the chemical compound of strange attributes, and he hated that he depended on it. And then Hyde hated him. In between going back and forth between the two, Hyde would start acting out on the things that Jekyll cared about. Destroying letters, he was burnt his dad's portrait, writing weird shit into random books that Jekyll held dear. Hence, what Utterson noticed in a book earlier. When he was just like, Jekyll likes this book, why would he write this stuff down here? Hyde loved being alive. He loved life. But he hated being in a cage. Jekyll is going to unalive himself, and that makes him pity Hyde. So he ends his confession by saying that nobody has suffered nearly as much when it comes to such a habit. His salts were low and he was desperate. He felt his soul was worn and dried out of life. He's never been able to find the same supplies he had before. He even talks about how he had Poole out there hunting from every vendor, but nothing came of it, which causes Jekyll to believe that it was an impurity to that batch he had before that made it work. The impurity must have gotten purified out because nothing worked after that. He's stuck. He's taken the last of his concoction and is prepared to have his last throes as Hyde in the end, knowing that there is no more Henry Jekyll after this. Within 30 minutes of the time he puts his pen down, Jekyll will be no more. Probably when he's wailing and scaring the servants and shit for that week that Poole was talking about. He takes the time to look over his face just once more before he realizes how worn out and lifeless he looks, possibly realizing he gave all of his desire to life to his alter ego. He can only hope he doesn't change into Hyde and rip it to shreds. Well, rip the paper to shreds. Because I don't think Hyde would do that. Hyde was talking to Utterson as if he were Jekyll in anger. He wonders if Hyde will die fighting or take his own life before Axeman Poole comes after him. He doesn't know that it's Poole with the axe, but still, it's there. He closes the letter to say the unhappy Henry Jekyll's life is done as he places the pen on the table. See, no one really describes Hyde's features. They describe the feelings he gives them. Thank you, Phil. They describe the feelings they give him. They describe the discomfort, the sense of evilness that wails from his body. Like Jesus. But they never describe his face. So I assume the face of Hyde is actually a very distorted, shrunken version of Jekyll, showing an amalgamation and an evil version of himself, squished down, pressed, but never really truly fully grown. What does that say about Jekyll? A man in his 50s who wanted to experiment more with his evil side, almost trying to make it grow. But instead of the growth coming, it just takes over his entire form. What do we make of a man who decides that what he chooses to do with himself is more important than who he does it to?